Well, welcome everybody. It's Telemedia News in 10, episode 15. Hi, Paul. How are you?
Hello, mate. I'm good. Good. Busy, busy, busy.
It seems like almost a month since we spoke last, and that's because I had a week off, or 2 weeks off, because I started trimming my beard, and it turned out to be a slightly bigger job than I'd originally anticipated, and so I missed our original meeting. So anyway, this is the new me, the
I
post.
knew there was something different about you. I just couldn't quite put my finger on it.
So, as I say, I missed you, mate, actually, and so good to
Yeah.
spend a bit of time with you. We're going to dash through four of the most interesting stories that came across our desks over the last couple of weeks. We're going to start off with some hot news on the latest market acquisition, something we've been predicting for a while. We're then going to talk about RCS and how it's slowly but surely creeping its way into the UK market. There's a very interesting report that came out which looked at telco attitudes to digital transformation. We're going to dive into that, and I'll tell you why later for very good reasons. And then finally, it's awards season. So we're going to look at some of the MEFI Awards winners and big up some of the hard work that they've been putting into making the wonderful world of telemedia rich and wonderfully commercial environment in which we can move forward in the 2021 year. So that sounded crap. Anyway, here we go. So first story is Calera to acquire mobile messaging solutions provider. Our dear friends, premium sponsors for Telemedia 8.1, MGAGE. And that has cost them a mere $215 million. Now that interesting because obviously we predicted a lot more M&A activity back in our Christmas show. And we predicted that consolidation would be a feature of the market. Now, this is another cloud comms provider coming into the market and targeting a messaging company, a little bit like the IMI story that we covered a couple of weeks ago. And sadly, acronym alert everyone, the CPaaS communications platform as a service is something that you've been banging on a lot about, Paul. I suspect it's not something we're going to get away from. And I suppose that this acquisition really sums up where the market's going in that respect, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, yes, I know you hate the acronyms, but the CPaaS one is we're stuck with it. It's the way we're all going. It's the nature of now the telemedia business. So yes. Well, what's interesting about this is it's very much like Cisco buying IMI Mobile. There's a lot of sort of more corporate unified communications providers that have sort of done all the internal telephony based networky stuff for big corporates, and they've all, I think, been caught napping by the sudden shift in consumer behavior towards using messaging. So WhatsApp has sort of driven it. RCS is coming down the pipe, as we shall talk shortly. Text, more and more people are using text and the sort of richer versions of text you can get with iMessage and those sort of OTT services. And a lot of these providers just didn't have the tools to do it, so they're having to buy the specialist companies like in this case MGAGE, and like Cisco bought IMI Mobile back just before Christmas. To add that functionality, because brands and businesses suddenly need the functionality of communicating with consumers and their customers on the platforms the customers want, which is messaging ones. And this is what this fits into. And I think that's what we're going to see a lot more of. And it builds this CPaaS idea more strongly. It sort of started with people like Centilli doing it for content and services and billing and all that. But we're also now seeing it in the more messaging-y world, where they're building these rich messaging platforms for in the cloud that businesses can tap into and use, because that's how sort of communication is. People don't pick up the phone and ring up companies now to talk to them when they have a problem or they need to ask them something. They just take to social media and messaging. And that's what this does. So yeah, it's an interesting move. I think we'll see a lot more of this sort of thing, bigger companies buying up these players. I think it's interesting because it sort of drives forward sort of the use of messaging, which I think then all the other things that we cover in telemedia benefit from.
Yeah, so for sure, it is the messaging really becoming the key communications channel. It seems to be.
Yeah, and it's commercial. It's this conversational commerce idea that you can actually sort of make these messages, as we'll see in a moment when we look at the RCS developments that have happened this week as well. That you can buy stuff from the message itself. So it's not just marketing; it's a way of engaging and directly monetizing things. So yeah, really important.
I don't know if this is relevant, but I was talking to one of our dear friends from SB7, big up to them, and we were talking about relevant share prices of telemedia companies over the last, or their share performance over the last couple of years. And he identified Click Digital as going from something like, you know, €1.50 to 23 quid or something. It's gone up enormously. And also, of course, Phonics, which launched at 90p and I think is now up around about the 150 mark. So, I mean, in general, it seems as though the valuation of companies in our sector is going up, which means that, you know, clearly, you know, the industry is becoming or being seen as, you know, high value in the move towards taking advantage of the digital economy and digital monetization in general.
Oh, definitely, absolutely. I think in some ways Calera have got a bit of a bargain with MGAGE. It's a couple of 100 million. It doesn't seem that much, but I think the potential it has that it brings to them is enormous. So yes, but yes, I think we'll see a lot more of this. There'll be certain companies that will be ripe targets, I think, for other bigger sort of messaging and comms and cloud companies to purchase.
Well, we'll be following the story as is our duty. And I did actually speak to MGAGE this week. Couldn't give me a huge amount of information on how it was all going to affect their business, certainly in the UK, or what it meant going forward. Is it's such hot news, and
certainly.
You know, it wasn't really much of a fanfare. It was sort of quite secretly, quietly put out, wasn't it?
Same with the Cisco IMI one, and no one's really wanting to comment from either company about what it means, where they're going. But I guess they don't know at this stage. I mean, they've only just sort of being amalgamated into these other companies. What actually then happens to them remains to be seen.
Well, we'll have to, and obviously we'll cover that and report as and when we hear. So moving on then, and I suppose you know, a nice segue. We're going to be talking about a big telco, BT, the mighty BT, working with our friends Infobit, and this is all about driving RCS into the UK market. So what were your thoughts on this particular liaison?
Yeah, well, I think it's a similar vein. I think it's BT sort of realizing that it needs to also have some sort of messaging play. Its tack, sort of PR wise at least, is to look to working with Infobit to publicize to the world how great RCS could be to sort of businesses. I think really what it's saying is, look, we've got RCS now. Let's do business. Yeah, I think it one sort of shows that RCS is now getting a really big push, because I think it's a workable solution. It just needs some sort of critical mass to start to become a thing. I think businesses need to be made more aware of it, and I think sort of, you know, the fact that someone like BT is now wanting to do it again, like teaming up with a relatively smaller company in Infobit to do it. It's a similar idea to these big comms companies buying up smaller ones. I know they haven't bought Infobit, but they're just working with them. But it's a partnership on this. It's again, I think, network operators in this case, rather than comms providers, being caught napping, not really ready or looking at where sort of consumer contact was going. And so they're doing this. But yeah, it's good news for RCS. I think it gives it a really big bit of clout to push it out there to all those Android users. And I think we'll start to see a lot more RCS messaging starting to drop onto phones fairly soon.
Just out of interest, why do you think the headline focused on RCS and not conversational commerce? Because obviously over the last couple of weeks, when, you know, we started off talking about RCS, and then, you know, lots and lots of companies that have been in the sort of commercial messaging space, like Centilli, for example, have been very keen to move quickly away from defining RCS as a thing, and much keener to talk about conversational commerce as a whole, sort of talking about embracing all of the different messaging platforms and all the different things you can do with that messaging channel. Interesting that they used RCS as their sort of tagline in the headline, and not, as you would perhaps expect, the conversational commerce. Any particular reason for that?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I mean, I think part of this might be that it's the story is sort of pitched at the sort of trade press. So we're talking about RCS as a technology and what it can do. I think the conversational commerce idea is one that sort of sits better maybe with the brands and end users who might start to embrace it. I think that it's difficult. I think they're not sort of bigging up that idea of conversational commerce yet. I think this is sort of just the first sort of salvo in getting the idea that RCS is out there as a business messaging tool, and BT are sort of behind it now and working with Infobit, and they can show some stuff. I think once they get into showing its real world applications through this sort of conversational commerce, they might start to embrace that kind of nomenclature for it. Yeah, I think it's early days. I think they're trying to convince businesses who might have heard of RCS that it's time to look at RCS with BT. I think the conversational commerce play is a bit of a bigger, more all-encompassing strategy rather than a sort of product push. So I think that's probably why it's not been focused on that so far.
Well, yeah, interesting. And I mean, in talking about sort of MNOs and telcos' view of the digital world ahead, there was a very interesting report that came out called The Road to Digital, which how telcos are migrating from physical to digital to broadband to broaden revenues in 2021 and beyond. This is put together by our good friends at Upstream, Telemedia 8.1 exhibitor. And they're a provider of innovative solutions that speak to 1.2 billion consumers. And a company called Technology Innovation Council, TIC, or TIC. My dog had one of those this week, in fact. So there you go. That's an interesting comparison. Now, the reason why this is interesting, I mean, apart from the fact that I suppose one of the keys to the future success of telemedia is going to be, has always been, the attitude of the telcos, MNOs towards the value-added side of our business, digital consumers, digital monetization, etc. So, but what was very interesting, this survey talked directly to them about their attitudes towards the future, what actions they were taking to respond, I suppose, to the accelerated factors of COVID and consumer behavior and everything moving from physical to digital channels. And we posted this up on LinkedIn, I think, last week, and we have got nearly 4,000 views on this one. Now, we are particularly good at performing on LinkedIn, and we would normally expect to get a couple of thousand views on a particularly interesting post, and I think that's good by anybody's standards. But this one really did outperform everything else. So it clearly shows that that the market looks to the MNOs and what they're thinking and what they're doing to enable them to know how successful they're likely to be going forward. So I don't know, what did you take away from that report?
Yeah, well, I think interestingly, people sort of are wrongly looking at MNOs to sort of guide them on the way forward. I think what struck me about this report is it very much looked at how mobile network operators sell their services, and to some degree how they also sell handsets and gubbins like that. And they sort of lag behind sort of pretty much most sort of retail sectors, if you look at it from a retail point of view, in being digital and trying to sell online and all that sort of thing. And I thought that was really surprising. I think what's also surprising, but also not surprising, is that this uncovered that despite the coronavirus and the pandemic making the world digital, network operators lag way behind in terms of their digital transformation strategies and where they are in implementing them. And again, I hate to go, it's obviously the theme of this particular podcast, but they too have been caught napping. I think that it strikes me that if you look at sort of big brands, big companies, big network operators, big comm suppliers, none of them saw this coming. None of them saw the fact that, given a little bit of impetus, digital and the digital side of comms and retail and customer interaction was going to explode. It was on the cusp of doing so. It was going to happen anyway. I guess they're were anticipating it happening further down the line, and coronavirus has accelerated that. But they really have not been ready to do it. And I think for an industry that sort of is actually the sort of fundamental underlying network structure that makes it work, it's quite surprising that the telecoms industry, the network operators, aren't as advanced with all this as you'd think they would be. Hopefully this will give them a sort of push. I think more people should be looking at the companies sort of in the sort of aggregator space and the billing companies and all those sorts of players, because they're much more on it and much more agile, and what those guys are doing is really where this shows a better roadmap, I think, of how this plays out.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, when I looked at some of the headline figures, 75% of telcos accelerate digital plans due to the pandemic. And firstly, you go, but why only 75%? I mean, how can you be in this space and not be accelerating your digital plans? There was another one, only 1 in 4 have got KPIs to measure their success in the digital space. How can that be possible? 74% plan to increase investment, which means, well done. But that means 26% do not plan to make any investment in digital. These are very strange figures. I must admit, the final point, I mean, they go through, all the various assets that the networks have, not least the big data asset, probably the biggest one of all. And the final stat says 52% said that they've already discovered the power of targeting and retargeting. Well done. But only half have discovered it. And it's like, well, but we were talking about this 20 years ago. I mean, surely, I found the data to be really startling, actually.
Yeah, it's shocking, isn't it? It is shocking, I think.
And, I must admit that when I was talking to, I talked to a number of our clients over the last couple of years, years and weeks. I talk to them all the time. In fact, I'm constantly, they know where I am. I've got a red phone on my desk and they can ring it any time, day or night. But we were talking, so often you'll get an aggregator or a content provider that's come up with a really sexy service. And the first thing they do is they say, we've got to get this in front of the networks. This is, cracking content. We need networks behind it. We need the billing support behind it. We need them to push it to their subscribers. And also, by and large, you're seeing content that's being produced, which is probably not very contentious, of a good quality, not likely to generate lots of complaints. Based on the fact that there's a drive towards that side of the business, you would think that there'd almost be no point doing a survey like this. It would be 99.9% have said this, 99% have said that they're pushing towards digital, and yet, I was really, really shocked actually that the survey needed to be done at all in many ways, but it was really revealing, and I suppose shows or illustrates one of the industry's major challenges, if it didn't know already, is just we have to fight to get the MNOs on board, because apart from the fact it's good for us, I mean, as you say, they are going to start finding that competition is going to be coming and lurking in the shadows, or even the clouds.
Absolutely, particularly in the clouds. Yeah, no, I think so. I think it just illustrates that sort of well-trodden sort of path that network operators move glacially slowly, and this time that was no good because the world around them moved very quickly. I like to think that maybe they'll take note and start to think about how they can be more agile and less sort of bureaucratic. I think it would benefit them all. You're right though. New entrants are going to come in and take their business away.
Well, and what we would hope is that anybody that loves our podcast would share this to their local operator chums, and hopefully they'll start to get the message through Telemedia Online, Telemedia Magazine, Telemedia News, Telemedia in 10, all things Telemedia, pushing towards trying to represent the industry to the MNOs and the telcos in a way that identifies, not only the opportunity commercially, but also illustrates what consumers with telephones in their hands are wanting to buy on and consume on a daily basis. So message to everyone out there, please do share this and say, this is the flag that we're waving as an industry. But I feel like this has been a slightly sort of downbeat podcast or vodcast or todcast. I feel like we need to pick it up a little bit and it's time to talk about awards.
Oh, well, okay, then something happy. I think it's just one of those weeks where there's been a lot of news that's more interesting rather than entertaining.
Oh, all right, fair enough.
But yeah, they're important things. These are the important issues. It's not all laughter.
Oh, well, the hairy bloke used to find it very funny. Now, let's talk about the MEFIs, our dear friends at MEF, Mobile Ecosystems Forum. We love them. If you're not a member, you should be. If not, why not? Get in there. You can also find them on the in the Telemedia 8.1 exhibition hall, obviously. And it was, yes, it's awards season. So you've got the Oscars, the Golden Globes, and of course, we all look forward to the MEFIs. The MEFI 2021 winners were announced this week during MEF's Connects Innovators initiative, which was an online get together, and it recognises the mobile pioneers setting new trends, technologies, and business models, advancing the global mobile ecosystem for the benefit of its users. And during this unprecedented period of digital transformation, I think it was particularly interesting and worthy of celebration that, again, I hate to say it, Telemedia 8.1 premium sponsor, Sam Media won the Richer Customer Engagement Award. So congratulations to them. And whilst I know that you and I are probably not their target audience, the Mobio 360 virtual reality streaming content service is, at first glance, something to behold. I don't know what you thought, but it's just a great representation of how investment in really high quality content is still important, even though it's very easy to say, oh, well, digital content consumption is up. There's millions more consumers out there wanting to buy more stuff. Doesn't mean to say you can sell them crap. And I think to see a service which is incorporating really kind of, really applying, again, technology that we were talking about AI last time, really applying technologies practically that people can consume right now and providing a very high quality service. They've already got 700,000 subscribers off the back. Just take a look at it. The idea of being able to tour cities and tour museums and take yourself off to distant planets is kind of obvious, but boy, oh boy, does this thing look good.
Yeah, no, yes. Well, their sort of strapline is delivering immersive content at scale, and you think that that very much is the sort of next step, I think, in content services. I mean, it's interesting point you made there about the fact that content sales are up and it's all sort of booming. But I think what it really means is not that you can sell them any old stuff, is that it's so competitive, you have to stand out.
Good.
This sort of stuff is right up there, and it is the next big thing that's now here. The next thing that we're all going to be doing is immersive 360 virtual reality content. I mean, virtual reality and augmented reality and mixed reality and all these things where you're overlaying sort of digital onto the real world in one way, shape, or form is the sort of very much the step we're about to take. And it just plays out into everything. I mean, it's going to change e-commerce. It's going to change gaming. It will change TV and street video streaming content. It will change messaging. It will change all the ways that people interact with stuff and how they buy them. And I look very much forward to the ability at some point to be in an immersive world in my headset and with just a flick of my eyes be able to buy something using carrier billing that then appears in my virtual world. It sounds fanciful, but I think it's not that far away.
But let's hope that the next thing they don't do a Mobio 360 version of World Telemedia, in which case that's it. I shall have to throw myself off a tall building with virtually, of course.
No. I think we're always going to need face to face. People miss all that. I think by the time sort of we can return to meeting in person, there'll be such a pent up demand for hugging and stuff that it will play a role. I just think these sorts of technologies allow you to extend what you do with live events into a whole different world, throughout the whole year. It's an amazing thing. I think a well-deserved award. It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to try and we're talking about doing a content and service track, putting a new track together for Telemedia 8.1 where people will be able to demo services to the wider market, and that's certainly one that we'd want to see. And interesting, I was talking to Leon at Sam Media earlier this week and offering my personal congratulations. But one of the things that he pointed out, which is really clever, again, you sort of think about rich content services and they're going to need lots of bandwidth and things like that. But one of the things that this does quite cleverly is identify or is able to provide a version of the service based on a wide variety of bandwidth. So, less complicated landing pages and all that kind of stuff. So they've really thought about everything, and the bandwidth issue is quite important. So look, we shouldn't just talk about Sam Media. I mean, I think it's also congratulations to Infobit. We've had 2 mentions now. This which is we must have them as an exhibitor after that. That's surely the next stage. They won the COVID-19 Mobile Response Award.
They did.
For their chatbots and messaging for government health organizations across the world. Again, I mean, I think that highlights that telemedia providers are operating in a wide variety of vertical sectors, not least areas that, again, perhaps we were probably ignored for 5 years ago, but government, healthcare, education. There you go. Infobit are all over that.
Well, to them it was excellent. It was a good late sort of category. I figure they added to the MEPIs there.
Yeah, and finally, the mighty Digital Virgo. Yeah, I say it every week. You can't keep them out of the news. They won the Mobile Monetization Award, and then some outsiders called .go won the Protecting Mobile Consumer Award. Now, what struck me about this? Now, I'm sure the guys from .go are fantastic, but given the number of fraud and security companies we've got in our wonderful world, I was very surprised to see that. We didn't, get a familiar name in that particular area, because clearly, anti-fraud solutions and cybersecurity have been an area that Telemedia has been championing for, certainly, in terms of exhibitors and sponsors and promoters and advertisers, very high profile companies for the last 3 or 4 years. So I was kind of surprised to see not a mention from one of those, from one of our dear friends. So, I think the challenge to them, start getting the message out there, guys. So finally, I think that draws us to a neat and tidy end. Me just abusing our clients for not being loud enough.
An interesting sales tactic, but let's try it. Who knows?
Goading Infobit into becoming an exhibitor is bound to work. Mate, thank you very much for your time. I know you're really busy.
You too, mate. You too. Yes, no, we've been working on exciting things. So it's good to be busy, but there's some good things coming down the chute for our readers and viewers. So all good. And enjoy your haircut.
Okay, yes, I'm going to go outside and enjoy my beard. So until next time, go back to your white papers, hide away, and I hope you get some sun on that balding pate of ours.
It's just looking a bit. I thought that was just the lighting. We're going to need to get a makeup person. We're going to have to hire makeup and possibly even hair.
Yeah, I think you're right. Albeit virtually. All right, mate. Cheerio.
All right. Ta-da!